All right. As our last day of semester, we have an honor to invite Margaret to give us a fantastic speech, which is also very, very important. We have started this series of a workshop 2 weeks ago. Finally, today we have a professional to teach us, what's going on. So I bet, people here and people online, let's just keep quiet and listen. Just remember, when a lawyer talks, you shut up and listen. Otherwise, then somehow you may think it's not relevant, but when it's relevant. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Margaret.
you.
So,
yeah, I just briefly introduce Margaret. I think, like I said in the poster, Margaret and I, we both work for the Department of Public Safety. Margaret specifically work on school safety stuff. So, Margaret.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. We'll see if I'm deserving after I'm done here. So let me tell you a little bit about who I am and what I do. And I feel awkward that I have my back to you. I'm so sorry, Ami. But I work in schools from preschool through college in Colorado. And I am the child sexual abuse prevention specialist. So I bring programming to schools to protect children from sexual abuse and programming to help children understand that, to help them be empowered in their own bodies, to protect themselves and in their relationships so that they have healthy friendships, healthy romance at some point. It's interesting talking to young children about that. But when we're able to talk to them when they're very young, they remember those lessons and they take them with them as they go to university. So I have 3 children of my own. I have twin boys who are 23 and a 20-year-old daughter. And as Yuan Ting said, we work together in the Department of Public Safety, and that means that you are all customers of mine. So if you have questions for me, I'm going to give you my email and my phone number. The subject matter that I will talk about today is sensitive, and I understand that. And I understand that we all bring our own experiences into this room, and sometimes it can be disturbing. So, and I'm not going to say anything graphic, but I want you to feel comfortable taking care of your needs. If you need to get up and move around, please do that. We're all adults, and I respect your sensibilities and your time. What else did I want to tell you before I start? I welcome you to have a different opinion. I welcome you to think critically about the things I'm about to say, because if you think that you have a better way, I can learn from you, and I want to know that too. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I do want to tell you that the information that I'm about to present came to us from the University of Colorado School of Medicine, the Department of Pediatrics, the Kemp Center, which is a globally recognized center that is designed to prevent and intervene with child abuse cases. So that's a big part of the information that I'm going to give you. And there are a couple resources that Yuan Ting and I are going to send to you by email afterwards, okay? And Yuan Ting is recording, so please let me know if I speak too quickly, and I'll slow down and repeat things, but you will have access to it, okay? So what I want to talk about today are identifying common sexual behaviors by age group with respect to the children that we're serving. So having said that, I know a couple of you in the room how old your children are, but does anyone have children between 0 and 5 years old that they care for at home? Yes? How about from 5 to 10 years old? Okay. What about 10 to 15? Okay. Anyone with children older than 15? Okay, all right. So we're the experts. You have to listen to us. All right. I'm also going to talk about what makes sexual behavior problematic. Like, when should we be concerned? Because I'm going to tell you right now, right out of the chute, that human beings are sexual and they are born with the capacity for sexual pleasure, which is crazy to think about with our infants because they're so innocent. But anybody that has changed a diaper or spent any time with a baby knows that their private parts feel good to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you just move around, and I'll talk to you about how to respond to these behaviors. But there are some behaviors that should cause us concern. And I'll talk about why. The response is the piece that can be the most difficult. What we want to do with children is generate empathy. So we want them to understand that their behavior, even their words, impacts all the people around them. And I'm sure that you agree with that. So we don't want to shame children in our response to their sexual behaviors, but we do want them to understand that sometimes their sexual behaviors disturb us and they shouldn't be done in a public place. So privacy is a really important message. This particular slide, I present to teachers regularly, and teachers are required by law in Colorado to report certain behaviors. That's why there's the child abuse hotline is there. It's not for you. But I will provide you some resources and support if you have questions. Okay, so our 0 to 2s, and I know some of you have babies in this age group. So what should we expect? We should expect that they're going to be touching their private body parts. We should expect that they have no idea socially when it's appropriate to touch their private body parts. I think a lot about, I mentioned that I have twins. I spent a whole lot of time changing little boys' diapers. And it was very clear to me that I needed to be on the defense at all times, because the minute that diaper came off, there were a couple things that were going to happen. One was they would often just let loose and I was going to get wet, or they would start touching their penises. And that was not at all uncommon. Sometimes when they were older infants, I even saw that they were capable of getting erections. Has anyone ever observed that kind of behavior with little boys? That happens? Yes. We often see babies and toddlers rubbing their private parts with their hands or with objects. They might use a toy. They might rub against their crib mattress. Those things are expected, not uncommon.
Is this just common for boys or girls?
Girls also, yes, girls also. And we expect babies to try to touch their mothers and other women's breasts. It's got to be an instinctual thing. That's how they eat. So they're interested in that. So that is not at all uncommon. So here's a test. If you are changing your 18-month-old's diaper and that child reached down to touch their private parts, what might you do? What would your response to that be? You could move their hand. I would say to my sons, no, ick. And now I think, oh boy, now they think that something's wrong with their penises, because I was always saying, no, but it was a hygiene issue for me. But if I had it to do all over again, I would not say that to them. I would hand them a toy or distract them in some way, or there's no harm in letting them touch themselves. It feels good to them. They don't think about sex. They're not capable of that. They're just exploring their body, and that's how they learn at this age. So it's perfectly fine to let them explore. And we'll talk more about what we do when they're older and they have an understanding of limitations. Okay, so now we're going to talk about our 2 to 4-year-olds and understand that many of the behaviors, and Yuan Ting, you're not getting any chats that people can't hear me, are you? Because I just realized my face is turned sideways.
They said they can,
They can?
Yes.
Okay,
but
good.
you probably want to share your screen to the, share this to the,
Oh, I thought I was. Let me try again. Did that work? Sorry, so sorry. All right, so our common behaviors from 2 to 4. What should we expect? And I know many of you have children that are between 2 and 4. Okay, and now it does not want to go forward. There we go. So our 2 to 4-year-olds think that their private stuff is really great and they want to show it to everyone and they want to see everybody else's. And that is perfectly normal and expected in this age group because they're learning about their world and they've discovered. And if you play a game with a 2 to 4-year-old, often it involves sorting because their brains are at a point in development where they're starting to understand colors, numbers, shapes, different, they want to classify and group things. And they want to do that similarly with people. They understand, I am a girl. Someone has told me that I am a girl. They may not stay a girl their whole life, but they know that that's how they've been identified. And they know that girls dress a certain way and that boys dress a certain way and that there are expectations for the genders. It doesn't mean, as I said, that a child will stay believing that that is their gender once they become, once they go through puberty and start dealing with attractions for other people. But when they're babies, when they're, between 2 and 4, they really understand gender. I should say they understand all of the societal lessons. And they want to know how they are different from other people. So they like to put gender as boy and girl. They want it to be clear for them because they want it to be black and white. They want to understand it. They love to be naked. They love to, I've had children run away from me and run and run and run naked. It can be very annoying as a parent, but it's expected behavior, nothing unusual about that. They also want, as I said, to see other people naked because they want to understand what makes us all different. They start asking about body functions at this age. They may want to know where babies come from. So we want to tell them the most simple answer. Babies come from mommies. Babies come from mommy's wombs. That's all they need to know. And then as they get older, we'll start to build on that messaging. One of the things that often comes up as a question in this age group is, when should I stop taking a shower or bathing with my child or my husband, doing that with the children, or even the children together? And my advice on that is you should stop doing it when the children or the child with you starts to really notice and talk about body differences. And if they're beginning to play sexually in the bathtub, if you have siblings that are close in age, it's probably time to separate them by gender. But, a question is different than wanting to play with body parts or wanting to touch body parts. So that's when you would definitely want to stop bathing or showering together. Is that consistent with what you would expect? Okay. So this one, talking to children their own age about body functions. So, for example, they might talk to kids their own age about passing gas or urinating or something like that. The reason that there's a qualifier here about their own age is It would be a problem if a much older child was talking to a younger child about these things, because that could be an indicator that that older child is trying to gain trust and friendship with that younger child in an intimate way. So we would want to watch for that. It's hard to talk about what's expected without contrasting it. I'm trying, but it happens. So another test for you. If you had a 4-year-old that was in your living room, touching herself on her private body parts, or had removed clothing and was touching herself while watching television, or playing on an iPad or something like that, how might you respond? It's awkward, right? Now, keep in mind, I've just told you it's expected behavior. It's not anything to get really upset about. So, but it makes us uncomfortable. So we want to go for that empathy piece, and we want to say something like, what you're doing is a private thing. And this is not a private place. This is where the family gathers. So if you are doing private things, you do them in the bathroom or your bedroom, that's where we can expect privacy. Now you have to decide if your religion, for example, prohibits this behavior, then you have to decide if you're going to give a value judgment to that. I felt very comfortable telling my children that they could make a choice. You could touch your penis here, or you could watch TV with the family, but you can't do both. And they always chose to stay and get their hands washed. But yeah, so, but there are families that would forbid that behavior even in a private place. And I can tell you that the scientists tell us there is no harm in this behavior. It doesn't hurt them physically. It doesn't hurt them emotionally. The only time it could become a problem is if they're doing it to the exclusion of other things. So if they're not playing with their friends, if they're not doing their schoolwork because they're so consumed by wanting to touch their bodies, then we would be concerned. But up until just about puberty, I wouldn't call this masturbation. I would call it self-soothing, because many young children use it to calm themselves down, and other children use it when they're bored. So we need to help them come up with other activities to soothe them. So just giving them a blanket or a soft, fluffy toy, or teaching them to rock themselves, or just to try to regulate their body with breathing. There are lots of other behaviors that we can ask them to do so that it won't cause problems in the family or elsewhere, which would be very bad. So those are some suggestions on how to manage it. So you could say something like I suggested, what you're doing is a private behavior, and this is a public place. So you shouldn't be doing that in a public place. Okay, so now our 4 to 6 year olds, we're going to see the same behaviors that I already talked about, and we're going to add a few. So now they continue purposely touching their body parts, and they start mimicking dating behavior. So we would expect them to be mimicking kissing, hugging, holding hands, but we would not expect to see them imitating sexual acts, because that would indicate that either they have seen something that was inappropriate, which is possible for sure because of computers and television, or even some children have seen the behavior in their own homes if they share a bedroom with their parents, for example. But we wouldn't want to see them imitating those very specific sexual acts. This is when poop talk, fart talk, pee talk becomes huge. They think it's hilarious. They want to talk about it all the time. And they're kind of testing limits to see how you will respond. And I have found, I remember when my sons brought snakes home from school. They're holding snakes in their hands. And I thought, Margaret, you could run away from this like you really want to, or you could stand strong and say to them, isn't that interesting? What a beautiful part of nature. And then they will never think that I'm afraid. So they would never try to chase me with snakes again. But I knew if I ran away and screamed, that would be a great new game for them. So the less you can react, the better it will be in the long run. In the moment, you may think, what are you saying? What did you just tell me? What are you saying to your brother? But if we can just say, yeah, that's part of being a human being, isn't it? We all have gas. Not a big deal. Let's move along. They continue to explore their private body parts with children their own age. Again, that qualifier is important, not with children older or significantly younger. And they start to desire privacy because we're giving those privacy messages. We're telling them that's a place where, or that's a situation where you should be private. All right, so what if we have a group of 6-year-olds, just a couple friends that are playing together, and they start tickling each other? Should we be concerned about that? Yeah, it's okay to play. Absolutely. It's okay to tease. It's okay to tickle. But the minute one of those children says no or stop, that's a good time to stop them and teach them, okay, this child just said no, and you need to honor their power over their body. We all have power over our body, because those are the first prevention lessons, so that somebody can't come in and force themselves on your child's body. We need to teach them, you can control, you can tell people to stop, even grown-ups. All right. So our 7 to 12-year-olds. In Colorado, the age at which a child can be charged with a crime is 10 years old. So we need them to understand what sexual behaviors could be criminal before they're 10 years old. Because a 4-year-old looking under a bathroom stall to see someone using the bathroom because they're curious about their body is very different than a 12-year-old doing that behavior. And the 12-year-old could be charged. Mm-hmm. So we need to explain to them, they need to have some foundational understanding of sexual behavior before they're 10. And most of our schools start sexual health education at 10. And you don't want your children to find out about sex from other kids at school. And you don't want them to be made fun of because they don't know. And so you can pretty much bank on the fact that by 5th grade, the kids in your kids' school know about sex, if not earlier. I distinctly remember when I was in 2nd grade, one of my friends told me how sex worked. And I was at St. Cecilia's Catholic Elementary School. And she told me that a man peed on a woman's belly button. And that made perfect sense to me because of the shapes of everything. And I could never figure out what a belly button was for. So I went and told my sister, who I was the youngest of 4, and she's 18 months older. And I said, Sheila, did you know this is how people have sex? And I told her, and she said, that's not how it happens. And she told me the truth. That was way worse than the man peeing on the belly button. I couldn't believe that that was the truth. But so many of us get bad information, right? And then we're embarrassed. So we need to go to our trusted family to tell us the truth so that we're not ashamed. And there's a safe place where maybe we could look at books together and understand body parts. And boys need to understand about periods, and girls need to understand that boys have wet dreams, and all of these messy things about being human, because it will serve them when they're adults.
Margaret, can we ask questions along the way?
Sure. Do you have one, or anyone else?
I have one. So if your child would never ask you, should you approach them and tell them these?
Yes, I would. Yes, because they're not asking you, but they are finding the information. They're getting the information from somewhere. especially if they are 10 or older. They are asking their friends or older siblings, or and we have a lot of kids that will look it up on the internet. And what they find there is not what you want them to learn. So I would absolutely start having conversations. Like I mentioned with our 2 to 4-year-olds, we talk about babies coming from mommy's wombs. Then when we start getting into this age group, you need to continue having the conversation about consent. That's the tickling conversation. Whenever anyone says stop, we stop. You have to have permission to touch other people's bodies. One of the lessons we can teach in our 7 to 12-year-olds is sit down and say, okay, I told you that babies come from mommy's wombs. Well, let me tell you how the baby gets into the mommy's womb. Mommies have eggs, very, very tiny eggs. Daddies have very, very tiny seeds. And the seed and the egg get together to form that baby. Now you can add whatever religious messaging you want to, or whatever your family value is to that. But then you need to tell them the way that the seed gets to that egg is this beautiful thing, this amazing, powerful thing we have in our bodies. And you get to decide, of course I told my children that when people were in love, this was one of the ways they could have sex. And this was the way to make a baby. It's important to tell them there are other ways that people have sex. Not at this age, but in the next age group, it's important to talk about that because I train on this topic across the state. And I hear a lot of teachers telling me that teenagers believe that having oral sex and having anal sex is safe because there's no pregnancy. They don't understand, first of all, that they can still be harmed. Second, they can get a sexually transmitted infection. Third, our bodies release hormones that bond us to the people that we have sex with. And that can really hurt us emotionally. So we have to talk about all of these important things. And starting when they're young helps so much. Because I remember when my sons were 7, same age I was when I learned, but one of the boys said, "Mom, you told us about these seeds and eggs. I want to know how they get together." And I knew I couldn't go with mommy's womb anymore. And so I told them, and they were both very quiet. And then the boy who hadn't asked, they were together in the car, which was great because I didn't have to look at them. But the one who didn't ask the question said, "Have you and Dad done that?" And the other boy said, "Duh." And then the other one said, "Where?" That is not a question I was expecting. I said, "In a very private place. That's where we have sex, is in very private places." That's why you knock on mommy and daddy's door. All right. Any other questions before I move?
Yes. So one question. Do the schools have such kind of education for every age?
They typically have, and definitely ask, because they should give you the book so you can review it before they teach your child. But they typically teach sex ed in 5th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade. I don't know if they do it in 11th grade. My kids didn't go to a traditional school.
Has a course called health. So I'm not sure whether the health course will tell them such things.
Yes, and I apologize to those of you on the at home. I don't know if you could hear the question. The question was, when can I expect my school to be educating my child? And my answer was, the schools that present sexual health education do it in 5th grade, 7th grade, 9th grade. But you have to ask your school if they're providing it. And if they are providing it, ask them for the book so that you can review it before your kids go through it. And then you'll be ready with their questions. So, and it surprised me very much when my children were in 5th grade. They talked about oral sex. They talked about anal sex. So that forced me to get courageous and talk to them when they were 10 about those things, because I didn't want them to find out from someone that wasn't me. So, all right, so let's talk about our 7 to 12-year-olds. So yes, question.
We grew up in a different society,
Right.
and a different time also with no internet, you know, and even school don't even talk.
Mm-hmm.
And what I observed as I grow up is that after coming school, I'm more open, and then we still are more progressive. But on the other hand, you know, I didn't really notice a lot. I mean, there are some other kids that, you know, middle school, high school, they're doing it, right? Sometimes we see a lot of people, and very few kids do that.
Mm-hmm.
The question I always have is, you know, by reopening talking about it, is that an encouragement for the kids? Like my daughter
To do it,
school,
yeah.
right? She's in high school. There were kids like 4 months ago. They do it on the school lawn.
Mm-hmm.
And they cannot doing it like right there. They don't want kids watching. And it's always this question. No, I didn't change it. But is it too open to talk about it so that it's like you are like
It's a good question.
Them a kind of like a hint, yeah, for them to even think about it. Because to me, as I grown up, it's very there are very few times that you even think about.
Right.
And then until, you know, when it's time, you know.
Yeah, so let me repeat the question for the folks at home. So, and it's a great question, and I have an answer. We'll see what you think about the answer. So the question is talking about sex with kids going to make them feel like they have permission to go do that? So my answer to that is, it is undeniable that in American society, children are surrounded by sexual images in fashion, in music, in movies, television. They are using sex to sell cheeseburgers in America. And it is a very confusing place to be a child, because just walking in the mall, they'll walk by a Victoria's Secret store and have a flood of hormones, because it's ridiculous what we expose them to. And I completely understand what you're saying about, because I didn't grow up in this America. I grew up in a much more conservative America. I grew up in Nebraska. I grew up in, we didn't have, Victoria's Secret models were like in magazines that people paid for, that level of nudity and sexual desire on their faces. And so it's very confusing for our children to see all that and not have someone that they trust to talk to about it. So they get quiet, and then they might search on their own. And we know that the incidence of pornography exposure is between the ages of 8 and 10. Is that what Murray Crabb says? Yeah. So we know that very young children are encountering pornography because they're curious. And so to stop that from happening, it's important that we open ourselves up to share the message with our values. Say, this is how it happens physically, but in our family, these things are important to us. That we not go out and have sex with people outside of a committed relationship. that we not treat people as objects, like you'll see in pornography and sometimes in the media.
Could I stop here?
Sure.
So, I mean, in terms of pornography, I know every kid does, even when I'm spoiled, they are selling it.
Yeah.
So boys would doing that, but it doesn't mean that they are going to go out and a girl will do that.
Right.
Because no, it's not acceptable behavior.
Mhm,
And most of the time, right, we don't get exposure
mhm.
to. I mean, of course, I mean we are now living in a different society, internet and all that. Right?
Mhm.
So if but knowing that you want to do it private and actually trying to find girls and boys and do it, these are totally two different things. If we are uh the society is encouraging, people to talk about it, to think about it. And I think wouldn't that be just like I mean we all accept
Mhm,
gender identity, right?
mhm.
But do we have to talk about it all the time? And
I understand what you're saying.
and gender identity is really small. I mean I really support it, accept it because we have to everybody.
Sure.
But that's a very small portion of society. And we are talking about every single day. To little children, even my little one, when he was, they were not used to talk about it.
Mhm.
The school and teaching. So I always this stuff. Yeah, we need to talk about it. Is it too early? Is 10 a good age? 12?
Well, I can tell you that the research shows that when we introduce comprehensive sexual health education in schools, and what that means when I use that expression, comprehensive sexual health education, that means we talk about consent, healthy relationships, inclusive health, so LGBTQ plus communities. When we put those programs in schools, children are less likely to engage in sexual behavior because they're able to ask questions, they are able to appreciate and understand the risks, and they don't engage in the behavior as frequently as children who get an abstinence only message or no message at all. Because the children that don't get that education don't understand that there might be a problem with the behavior. They are at the risk of someone manipulating them and saying, everybody does this. If you did this with me, that would show me that you love me. You have to show me that you love me by doing this. But if they go to a comprehensive sexual health education course, they learn, no, I have the right to make decisions for myself. And someone who's manipulating me like that is not in a healthy relationship with me. And they also understand that children don't engage in sexual behaviors. They can't consent. So if an adult tries to, they can protect themselves better. So that's what the research shows. And I understand your concern because I always thought, oh, I don't want to talk to my kids about vaping and smoking weed and drugs and all those things. But you have to. Yeah.
I'm just like my head. For example, my kids they went to fourth grade. My friend, he thinks that he's asexual or he likes boys more than girls or the other girls and all that. I am a lesbian.
Mhm.
I mean, at that age, can they decide whether?
Well, it's interesting because most people that are gay say, I knew when I was 8 or 9 years old. But there are people that, change throughout their life. So, or just they aren't open to that possibility. They just think something's wrong with them and they try to live their life in a way that society tells them to live. So it's so complex. And I understand your concerns. I guess the important the most important message I would take away is exactly what you're doing, being open with your children. They obviously trust you and love you, and they come to you with questions and concerns. And we want to teach them kindness for all people so that they don't isolate children who are LGBTQ, because we know that societal outcomes for them are very poor. They're much more likely to have suicidal ideation. They're much more likely to self-harm, to use substances. So we want to make the world as kind for them as we can.
Thank you.
Sure, go ahead.
So this is like a silly question.
I doubt it.
2-year-old, he wanted to kiss me on my lips.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, he does that all the time. You do kind of baby rap him and say, no, like it's much better than kiss on the face. Lips. He's threw a big fit. He's very upset to do that. And I just remember for my older kid, when he was in kindergarten, he and other girls, their friends, they'll kiss each other on the lips when they say goodbye. And I don't think he does that anymore. So I just wonder, is there a better way to do it?
Yeah, so the question is about kissing on the lips. Kids kissing their friends, kissing their parents. And so I think it's a great learning opportunity for a couple different things. One is, you can kiss mommy on the lips, but that's something that is a special kiss that you shouldn't be kissing other people on the lips. And you can also tell your child, today I feel like just having a big hug with you. And because I have power over my body, just like you have power over your body, I don't really feel like kissing on the lips today. Either, my lips are dry, or I have a cold, or whatever, just you're not feeling it. That just setting a limit once in a while shows them that they have the power to set their limits too. And say, you tell me if I ever kiss you or hug you and you don't feel like you want to do it, and watch and see if they kind of assume that and try their power a little bit. But I'm not concerned about your other child at that age kissing on the lips. It may be a school policy violation, so you have to make sure that that's not a problem.
Yeah.
Because some schools are like no touching, which I think is hard to enforce. But I get it. They don't want to have to say this touch is okay, that touch isn't. So.
Margaret, I have another question. I know a lot of Chinese parents like to sleep with their child, like reading and then fall asleep along with their kids. Is that a good thing? Or we shouldn't be more independent?
Yeah, I don't have strong feelings about it. The only strong feelings I have are when they're babies and it's a danger. There's a risk that, we could suffocate them. But if they're older and you're all comfortable with it, I don't think there's any problem. The one thing that we have to do as parents is teach our children to be able to regulate their own bodies so that they'll be independent people. And you'll know when the time is right for that to happen. I don't think it's a big problem, but it can definitely make relationships between husbands and wives more difficult. So that may be the reason that the kid gets out of the bed. So, but you get to decide. Sure.
I have a boy,
Mhm.
so most of the time I just take my boy, go outside and attend all kinds of stuff. And my question is, what is the age I can accompany him go to a women's restroom? Because sometimes I just don't feel safe for him go by himself to the men's room.
Oh, I understand. Yeah, so there's no hard and fast rule. I think if you're with him, and I mean, there's nothing happening in women's bathrooms. I mean, nobody's private parts are exposed. I don't think it's a big problem. But he'll probably let you know when he's ready. I would say probably around 10, maybe 12. Like I've taken my children to like stadiums, like the Broncos Stadium or Rockies game, and it terrifies me to send them into the men's room.
Yeah.
So I would just stand right outside the men's room and wait for them.
Yeah, sometimes I just want you and then okay, communicate with me, so I know he is inside.
Yes,
And nobody can order.
right. And you can say, I'm right outside. I'll hear you if you call me. So, but we also want them to feel safe in the world. So we don't want them to feel like a bathroom is a scary place. We want them to be cautious, but not afraid. So letting them have a victory like that, like, wow, you went to the men's room all by yourself. That was awesome. Look how big you're getting now. That will give them confidence.
Yeah, but in reality, I mean, some places the bathroom sometimes isn't really nice. It's like people can smoke or something.
Yes.
Mhm. In the bathroom. So.
Yeah, and we want them to feel, especially if they're of school age, we don't want to be sending a message that that bad things will happen to them in the bathroom, but we want them to be aware. So I hope that helped. All right, so when I talk about playing games with children their own age, remember this is our 7 to 12-year-olds. If they're playing games with each other, they are also playing sexual games, potentially. Playing games like Truth or Dare or Spin the Bottle. These are American games where, like if I spin the bottle and it's pointing to you and you know, the bottle's this way, then you have to kiss. They're innocent little games like that, but they start playing them in this age group so that they can interact with the other gender more comfortably. So if that's happening, that's expected. It's not, now I'm not saying we shouldn't set rules about it, just like masturbation in this age group is expected, but we have to tell children in this age group that is not something that you can do in a public place. It's against the law. So you need to stop doing that and set rules. Now, if the kids easily accept the rule and you don't see the behavior again, that means that the empathy has worked and that these children are perfectly capable of understanding these messages, and we don't need to worry about that. We want to redirect if they're playing sexual games, because we want to set limits and make sure that they're staying safe and not taking risks like Truth or Dare is a game where you could dare someone to run through the neighborhood without their shirt on, like a girl. That's a risky behavior. That would be dangerous for a girl. So we want to make sure that there are adults around to make sure the kids are safe. But yeah. When do they start? When do they start or when do they stop? Start. Yeah, so it can start as early as when they're still infants. And some people never masturbate. So that's another thing to consider. So if this is a foreign concept to them, it's because it's never occurred to them that they wanted to do that. And it doesn't make them, an oddity. It's documented in the research. So some people never do, but most people do, I would say between 0 and puberty. That's when it would start. Thinking about it in a sexual way. Yeah, so it would be probably between 7 and 12. I don't think that children under that, unless they've had a negative experience or a sexual experience, which would be negative by definition, under 7, they wouldn't understand what sex is. But between 7 and 12 is when their bodies start to get those hormones going, and the desire to act out sexually, the desire to be attracted to people begins. So that's when we would expect them to think about sex. Same, yeah. This continues from early childhood. Looking at pictures, I've talked a lot about pornography. This is certainly a common thing between 7 and 12 and later into life. they seek out sexual content in media, and I mean music, TV, movies. Their desire for privacy now is desire to be alone as much as privacy to protect behaviors. They're becoming more independent. They are observant of gender roles, but they may not feel like they belong how society is telling them how they're supposed to belong. This one is easy. All right, so if your child comes to you, let's say at age 7 and says, "What is sex?" I have a trick for you. The trick is, your answer is, "What do you think it is?" Because that buys you time and it tells you what the kid's mindset is. The kid may be asking, "What's gender?" They may not be asking about sex at all. And they may be trying to figure out, is sex gender? Is it the same thing? Is sex an act, or, what is it? And that's different than explaining penetrative intercourse. So that's one trick. Another trick, if let's say your 12-year-old comes to you with a slang word, an expression, and says something like, "Can you tell me what a blowjob is?" Now, that's a slang American term for oral sex. You can use the same trick. Tell me what you think it is, but you absolutely want to know why they are asking when they're talking about a graphic sex act, because they may say something to you like, "Well, my friends are talking about it on the playground, and I'm just acting like I know what it is, but I don't." That's different than, "My uncle is asking me to play a game." So we need to ask and find out why they want to know.
Problem is, I feel like somewhere along what you're saying was the free access of internet.
Right.
I don't think the kids are actually going to ask you if they ever had a question about that. They probably already switched line, and so
Right.
that's the thing. I feel like my kids are never asking. I have 11-year-old. He never expressed any interest about playing with girls or anything. No, but I don't know how much he knows about sex. I don't,
Right.
about sex and everything.
Right. And so you're kind of wondering, when should I start this conversation? So I was telling you before everybody got here, I was telling you on team, one of my secret mom ninja tricks. When my kids were, middle school, so right about 11, 12, 6th grade, they had a glass shower door in their bathroom. Now, this can work in any configuration, but we happen to have a glass shower. And I put a little sign at the top, and it said, "Mom's Hot Topic Board." And I would take articles that were age appropriate about sex. This is how it works. This is what this means. This is, and I would tape them onto the shower door facing in, so that when they were there in their private moments, they didn't have anything to do. They could read the articles. And sometimes they would come to me and say, "Wait a minute, I have to talk about this because one of my friends was talking about that." And other times they would walk downstairs and roll their eyes. "Mom, you are so gross." Or, "Mom, you don't know what's going on." And I would say, "I know, that's why I wanted to talk to you. Tell me what you think." It's a great way to start conversation without forcing yourself in person. And it gives them a little safe space. If you don't have a glass shower door, you could tape it to the wall. And if you need articles, I can help you with that, because I have articles that are appropriate for children to read. There are even YouTube channels about sex that are cartoons for kids. They're designed for kids, but be careful when you're searching for them. So yeah, there's a lot of great information out there, and definitely start the talk. You could even use this as an excuse. There was this crazy lady from the Department of Public Safety that I listened to today, and she said, "You already know about sex. Do you know? Should we talk about this?" Because your kid's going to go, "Yes, I know." And they're going to act like they know everything, and they don't. So at least they don't know it with your values and your voice.
That's what I was thinking too. I was gonna ask, like, so
Mhm.
we talked about this at the school. I was wondering how much the
Right, right. I need to know what you know. Yeah. I need to know if you need help with this. It's super awkward, but it will bring you so close. It has really helped me with my children. And their friends are amazed. Like, wow, your mom is the sexting lady? Because I'm like, yeah, that's me. All right. So, and that this is part of that. Their peers are the most important thing to them in this age group. But year after year, we survey teenagers and we ask them, do you listen to your parents when they talk to you about sex, smoking, drugs, alcohol, driving? They always say yes. They act like they aren't going to listen to you. They, in these anonymous surveys, they say, oh yeah, I listen to my parents. Their values are important. So keep talking, even if they act like they're not listening. This is pretty obvious. There are a lot of comparisons going on in schools, saying, oh, they're comparing body shapes and sizes. They're comparing sexual experiences. They're comparing whatever they can compare. And it's very intimidating and uncomfortable. And I'm sorry. Oh, you got him. Thanks, Deontay. It's a very frightful time. And even girls need to understand their body parts don't look like other girls' body parts. I didn't know that until I was like in my 30s. I saw this piece of art that was like plaster of Paris sculptures of women's external genitalia, and they all looked completely different. I was amazed by that because I haven't spent a lot of time looking at women's genitalia. So children need to understand you aren't going to look like everybody else. Everybody looks different. Everybody's special. Everybody has their thing. And just because you don't look like those other people, I mean, some people are circumcised, some aren't. They need to have that information. About comparisons, I already talked about that. This is pretty obvious, right? Between 13 and 17, this is when they really start becoming quite interested. When we ask people who are, well, and even think about your own life as a heterosexual person who I was named female at birth, and that's how I identify. I can't tell you when I knew my gender identity and orientation. I just knew it. And that's how gay and trans people tell us they felt as well. That I knew I was different from other people when I was 4. I didn't know how. Or I knew I was attracted to the same sex when I was about 10. Or I was confused about it because I was attracted to people in my own gender because I was comfortable with them. But did I want to have sex with them? No, that's the difference. And that's something we can ask our kids about. You know, if they're saying, I'm confused about this. Well, do you want to have sex with women or men? It's a really legit conversation. And if they say, I don't know, then that's for them to discover on their journey. But if they do know, then that can give them some like, oh yeah, sex with a man makes me sick to my stomach. I wouldn't want to do that. So that can help them. Rapid mood swings because of their hormones and fierce seeking of independence. Now I'm going to talk about what separates these typical things from things that aren't typical. Do you want to stand up and stretch? It's so dark in here. You're probably getting sleepy. Feel free. But sexual play is typical when it occurs between children who know each other well. And I'll contrast this with if you take your child to the playground and they meet a child they've never met before, and that child tries to engage your child sexually, that is not typical. There's something wrong there. And that would be a big concern, a red flag for me. If they're playing sexually with kids that they've grown up with, even siblings, completely expected. We want to be sure that the children are of the same size and general age and understanding. Otherwise, we need to be concerned because someone may be trying to take advantage of another child sexually. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that the sexual play is okay. I'm just saying we need to intervene and stop the sexual play and explain that it's not appropriate. And if we don't see it again, then we'll know that the kids are safe. But we need to supervise them and watch them if we have observed them playing together sexually in the past. But it's what I'm saying is you don't need to run your child to a psychologist thinking something's wrong, because the behavior is expected. But if they can't stop the behavior, that's when you would want to get help from a counselor.
Wait, Margaret,
Yes, question?
Most stuff you were there about the siblings, because you know the sex offender, a lot of stuff happening like in the family.
Yes.
So you said it's typical.
Yeah, it's expected for siblings to engage each other in sexual ways because they're curious. But what is not typical is for one child to trick another child into sexual play without them understanding what they're getting into. It's not typical for a child to overpower another sibling and to force them or in some way inhibit them from telling others. Those are signs that abuse may be happening. But it's not at all unusual for children to explore each other's bodies in curiosity. If siblings were engaging in acts of penetration, that's a big concern. And that's something that I would want to get help with. Does that help? Okay, I'm just going to flip through these because I am taking a lot of your time. It's been a great conversation though. I don't want to interrupt it. And to Yuan Ting's point, we want to make sure that when sexual play occurs, that it is voluntary, that no one's being forced into it, that there's no strong emotional response. Because if we have a kid that's crying, there's no consent. And we need to make sure that everyone's feelings are protected and intervene and stop the sexual play. Always redirect. But as I said, if a kid understands the rules, oh, I didn't know that was the rule, okay, won't do that anymore, then you know you're safe. You just have to explain it and educate them, because they're not born understanding that sex play is not okay. Okay, so it becomes problematic, I mentioned this, when it's beyond their developmental age. If they're playing and there's penetration, that's beyond their developmental age, unless they're a teenager, and then it's expected behavior. Anytime there's hostility, aggression, anger, any of those things, that is a red flag. I already hit that. I hit that. Sorry. So this is an interesting one involving inappropriate or harmful use of sexual body parts. Anytime children are engaging in sex, so this could be 13-year-olds who are, I just said it is not unexpected for 13-year-olds to engage in intercourse. It's not wildly inappropriate. It would be in my life, but I'm saying that the scientists say it's not wildly inappropriate or unexpected. But those 13-year-olds are at risk. And anytime we have children having sex, they're using their body parts in ways that can cause great harm to them. So that becomes problematic and the behavior needs to be stopped. I mentioned this already in connection with masturbation. So yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so if, for example, little children are touching each other's private body parts with sticks, something that could hurt them like that, or older children, what I was describing, 13-year-olds, they are old enough to have intercourse. But if they do, that would be harmful use of their sexual body parts, because it would be devastating if they were to get pregnant or get a sexually transmitted disease or have that emotional connection with another person before they're ready. So just sex is harmful use of body parts where children are concerned.
Not be physical.
Right, right. So there are certain children that cause sexual harm, and we work with and for this population in public safety. And children who cannot self-regulate sometimes cause sexual harm. They act out sexually because they're having big feelings and they don't know what to do with these big feelings, and they want an adult to respond. So they might act out sexually because they know that gets a big response. So you might see that happen. Children that have been traumatized might act out sexually. A lot of foster parents, adoptive parents talk about kids acting out sexually because they have been abused. And it could be any kind of abuse, neglect, physical abuse, or sexual abuse. You might see it come out as sexual harm. Exposure to adult sexual activity. So that could be that they themselves have been exposed to it, or that they observed it through pornography, or there are a lot of possibilities there. Inadequate supervision in the home, meaning that they are seeing things they're not supposed to see. The parental controls are not on. The phones are open to Wi-Fi. They can access anything. That's concerning. Now, does that mean that they're neglected? No. I mean, kids run into pornography with perfectly adequate supervising parents. It happens. But it could be that a parent isn't paying close enough attention, so they run into it over and over and over and over. It's not just a rare incident. I don't have anything to say about that. This sounds a little judgmental, honestly. Societal rules about modesty and privacy. We have different rules in different cultures, and we have to honor that and name it. And I already talked about abuse, but these are the reasons why why a child might cause sexual harm to another child. So the last 5 minutes here, what are we teaching and how are we teaching it? And I have talked a lot about many of these things already in our conversation, so I should be able to get through this pretty quickly. So our 0 to 4s, we're going to talk about touch, and we're not going to talk about a good touch or a bad touch like it's a moral thing. We're going to talk about touches that make you feel bad in your tummy, like that, like uncomfortable touch, because people could sexually abuse a child and it could feel really good physically. And we don't like to think about that. It's very unpleasant to think about it, but it's a fact. Our bodies are designed for sexual pleasure, and they betray us sometimes, even if someone's abusing us or harming us. So we want to talk about how touch makes us feel inside. And this is also, we can start 0 to 4 talking about consent and who can touch your body. And I know you don't like it when the doctor touches your body, but they have to do that to keep you safe. And mommy or daddy will stay with you. So those kinds of messages. Another easy one to remember is no one should touch you anywhere that would be under your swimming suit. So if you're trying to come up with good preventive messages, that's a good one. Your body belongs to you. You get to decide who touches you and how it makes you feel. Now, there are exceptions to that, of course, especially with 0 to 4s, but we can explain the exceptions. The general rule is a good one. They need to know that they have private body parts. A lot of children don't know that their genitalia should be treated differently than other parts of their body. So they need to know that to protect themselves. They should understand that they should not keep secrets with anyone. Oh, baby. They shouldn't be keeping secrets with anyone, that nobody can keep a secret from mommy or daddy, that there can be surprises and they'll be revealed, but secrets are inhibiting and binding, And that's how sex offenders can get children, is by asking them to play secret games, asking them to keep secrets, our secret friendship. So that's why we don't want children to ever have secrets from their parents. They need to know who trusted adults are outside of their family, in addition to their parents, because you should have conversations with them about, okay, what if you have a really, really big secret and you're afraid mommy and daddy are going to kill you if you reveal it? You need to have somebody that you can talk to, because if you're super worried, we don't want you sitting there because you're precious to us and we don't want you worrying. We want you to have somebody that you can talk to. And that might be an auntie or an uncle or a close family friend, but you want to vet them very carefully. So our 4 to 6-year-olds, we're not talking about sexual abuse to them, but what we are saying is that no one should be touching their private parts or looking at their private parts, and the reverse. No one should make you look at their private parts. Nobody should ask you to touch their private body parts, because we always remember the first one, but sometimes we forget that second one. We want them to know that if someone breaks the rules, it is never their fault and they will never be in trouble. That sometimes adults have power over children, that if someone touches their private body part or asks them to touch theirs, it's not their fault and they won't be in trouble. All right. Strangers, we have to talk to them a little bit about, just because the world is full of strangers and children are harmed by strangers. It's just very rare. It's only about 10% of the cases. 90% of the time, it's someone that they know and love and trust. Okay, our 7 to 12. Now they're gaining an understanding of sexual desire. So we can talk to them about why someone would want to harm another child. I wouldn't do this at age 7, but by 12, I would. When my daughter was in 3rd grade, so how old was she? 8. And I've had this job for a long time. I was a prosecutor in Jefferson County before I took this job. And so I knew how to teach my kids not to be sexually abused, right? We talked about it all the time. And my daughter came home from school. Actually, she was standing in the front yard. And I drove in and she put her hand on her hip. Mom, some guy used the puppy line on me. Like, I'm not stupid. I would go to look at a puppy in the car. And my heart, I am telling you, my tongue like swelled up in my mouth. We had to call the sheriff's office because somebody had tried to get my daughter into the car to see puppies. So we need to practice with kids. No adult ever needs your help. Don't help an adult find their lost dog. Don't help an adult find their lost kid. Adults have all the power and all the money. They don't need your help. It's a trick. So they need to know those kinds of things. We have to teach them online safety because this is the world they're living in. Without making it sound like we're blaming them, we need them in this age group and older to understand it is not their fault if someone harms them, even if they were drinking, even if they were smoking weed, whatever it is. That's a bad thing. We don't want them to be doing those things, but we don't want them to keep sexual harm private from us because they're afraid to tell us that they drank a beer or 2 or 5. So we need to talk to them about, you don't want to find yourself in a social situation where you can't make good judgments. Dating rules, we need to, and this starts in preschool: consent, 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 respect, kindness, all the good stuff. And empathy is really important. How would other people feel if this happened to them? So we need to make sure that we're not asking our friends to send us sexy pictures. We are not asking our friends to put themselves at risk. Relationships are all about equality, and they have a right to be equal in their relationships. So coercion can look like physical overcoming someone, but it can also look like, oh, please, 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 I'm dying. I have to have sex. If you don't have sex with me, I'm going to explode. I mean, that's coercion because it wears someone down over time. And we need our sons to understand that. That's not fair. That's a weapon. So they shouldn't be talking to women like that. So now that's the end. This is the research that I used in this presentation. And this is my contact information. Yuan Ting is going to send you some handouts and she'll send you my information also. But if you want to jot it down, if you want to call me or ask me a question, not in front of all these folks, I'd be happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Any last minute question?
I'll stick around. Yeah, go ahead.
So, we usually, think of abusive relationships, usually for are they situation or study of will be abusive or
Yes.
actually,
Yes, and there are many men who identify as having been victims of sexual abuse. In fact, it's about one, it depends on the research you look at, but it's, I'm gonna use 1 in 20. I'm gonna use 1 in 20 men after they're 18 say that they experienced sexual abuse when they were boys. And women are abusers. Women have absolutely, adult women take advantage of children. And older female children have sexually harmed younger children, boys and girls. So you shouldn't feel that your child is safe just because they're with a female babysitter or a teacher. And those are the ones that hit the headlines. But what you want to watch for is the behaviors. Is that person showing too much attention to my child? Is that person singling my child out or asking my child to spend time with them alone without me? Those are things I would be concerned about. Does my child act differently when they spend time with those people? Do they appear to be nervous or afraid when I ask them to spend time with my child?
it's very similar to male abuse.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I usually talk to my daughter more about something about what should I talk about my phone.
I have another tip that you should share with your son. Most women, I shouldn't say most, many women have the experience of their mother to tell them that, like, when women go to the gynecologist, for example, there's an expectation, like their mother will tell them, this is what you should expect. And they'll walk them through, this is what a pelvic exam is going to be like. Almost no one tells their sons that doctors should always be gloved when they're touching them, that they should never, there's no reason to penetrate a boy in a physical exam until they're of a certain age. And I mean, that's how a lot of sexual abuse happened in higher institutions, because the athletes didn't know that physicians should be gloved. They didn't know that they didn't know what was normal. So you have to share what's normal with them.
Yeah, I share with some careful with other men.
Yes.
I hardly share anything about,
Other women. Yeah.
women. So, yes.
Yeah. But it sounds to me like you have a close relationship with him where you're sharing respect and boundaries and honesty. And I think when a parent has a relationship like that with their child, they're far less likely to be abused. The research shows us that sex offenders look for children who are socially isolated. They look for children who don't know the proper anatomical names for their body parts, because they know that someone hasn't shared that with them and invested in that with them, and they know that they don't have a trusted relationship with an adult who would do that. But if someone, you know, if a child talks about my penis, my vagina, then the sex offender goes to the next child. It's like putting a Rottweiler in front of your child. They don't want to mess with your kid because you've talked to your kid. So it's great prevention. Any other questions?